He injected thousands with bacteria on purpose, and they thanked him for it. Meet the Nazi-employed doctor who deceived Hitler by turning an entire town sick with a disease that did not exist. This is a bizarre true story of how creating a counterfeit plague zone became the most ethical medical decision in wartime history. In 1939, Nazi Germany had just invaded Poland. A young Polish physician named Eugene Lazowski had completed his medical training just as his country fell into Nazi hands. As a doctor, he was sworn to protect lives, but the new Nazi occupiers had different plans. The Nazis had begun rounding up Jews across Poland for deportation, transporting them to concentration camps few would survive. In the small town of Rozwadów, Dr. Lazowski watched as his Jewish neighbors disappeared one by one. While most felt powerless under Nazi control, Lazowski was about to undertake one of the most ingenious medical deceptions in history. He created a fake epidemic that would make the Nazis too afraid to enter an entire region in Poland. To understand Lazowski's genius, you need to understand typhus, one of history's deadliest killers. Typhus is a nightmare disease. It begins with body lice, tiny parasites that thrive in crowds unsanitary conditions, exactly what the Nazis created in ghettos and camps. When an infected louse bites you, it defecates on your skin, and when you scratch the bite, you literally rub the infected feces into your bloodstream. Once inside, Rickettsia prausecki bacteria multiply explosively, attacking blood vessels throughout your body. Within days, victims spike fevers of 104 degrees, develop excruciating headaches, and break out in a distinctive rash all over your body. As the disease progresses, delirium sets in. Many victims experience vivid hallucinations and almost certain death because in the 1940s, there was no cure. The Nazis feared typhus because it did not discriminate between victim and oppressor. Their soldiers could catch it too. Working alongside his colleague, Dr. Stanislaw Maciejewicz, Lazowski discovered something crucial, a way to trick the typhus test. The standard test for typhus was a Weil-Felix reaction, which detected antibodies to bacteria called Proteus OX19. But the doctors discovered that injecting dead Proteus OX19 bacteria wouldn't cause typhus, it would only make the blood test positive. In other words, they could make people test positive for a deadly disease without actually making them sick. And in Nazi-occupied Poland, testing positive for typhus had an unexpected benefit. It meant quarantine instead of deportation. The doctors implemented an elaborate underground medical operation that required absolute secrecy, and soon what began with a few patients soon expanded to an entire region. Lazowski converted the back room of his clinic into a secret laboratory where him and Maciejewicz cultured the Proteus bacteria in converted kitchen equipment. They stored the cultures in ordinary medicine bottles labeled as vitamins or painkillers in case of surprise inspections. The injection network operated like a well-oiled machine, and it had to. Locals would come to Lazowski with seemingly routine ailments, but mentioned they had a cousin needing special medicine. This signaled someone needed protection from deportation. Much of the work happened under curfew. Lazowski would make house calls under the pretense of treating night fevers, carrying his secret injections hidden in false-bottomed medical bags. The local Polish police, many secretly working with the resistance, would warn of German patrols, allowing the doctor to avoid checkpoints. To make the epidemic believable, they maintained detailed counterfeit medical records. Patients were carefully instructed on how to describe typhus symptoms if questioned. Some would rub their skin raw to simulate rashes. Others learned to fake delirious behavior typical of typhus victims. The deception was incredibly dangerous. Discovery would mean certain execution for the doctors, but Lazowski and Maciejewicz were careful. They only gave the fake vaccines to non-Jews who might be sent to labor camps. Jewish citizens already confined to ghettos and under heavy scrutiny received fake documents identifying them as infected Poles instead. A network of trusted clergy, teachers, and postal workers helped distribute these forged papers that reclassified Jews as sick Polish Catholics. Local undertakers even staged mock funerals with empty coffins marked typhus, do not open, to reinforce the illusion of a deadly outbreak. As reports of widespread typhus infection reached German authorities, they declared the area an epidemic zone, effectively a quarantine that kept Nazi officials away and prevented deportation. German soldiers posted warning signs but wouldn't enter. The area became known as the private ghetto. Perhaps most ingeniously, the doctors ensured the epidemic spread in a scientifically realistic pattern. The first infected railway workers and postal employees, people who would logically be early carriers in a genuine outbreak before expanding to the general population. By 1943, the epidemic had been raging for nearly 2 years. The German health department grew very suspicious. Strangely, while tests showed widespread typhus, reports of death from the disease were minimal. They sent a team of doctors to investigate this. This was the moment of greatest danger for Lazowski, because if discovered as a fraud, not only would the Lazowski be executed, but the Nazis would certainly punish everyone in town as revenge. The German Medical Commission arrived with armed SS guards. Lazowski, thinking quickly, welcomed them with a dinner and a generous amount of vodka. When it came time for the actual inspection, he took the German doctors only to the homes of the sickest looking patients with high fever from other illnesses. Fearful of contracting typhus themselves, the German doctors declined to examine patients closely or take their own blood samples. Instead, they hurriedly concluded their investigation and recommended that the quarantine remain in place. The ruse had worked. The fake epidemic continued. Until the end of German occupation in 1945, the epidemic protected approximately 8,000 to 12,000 Polish citizens, Jews and non-Jews alike, from deportation to concentration camps. After the war, as Soviet forces occupied Poland, Lazowski eventually emigrated to the United States, where he became a professor of pediatrics at the State University of New York. He rarely spoke about his wartime activities. It wasn't until the 1980s that his story began to emerge. He published an article in a medical journal describing the private ghetto he had created. I was not able to fight with a gun or a sword, but I found a way to scare the Germans. In 2000, at the age of 87, Dr. Lazowski finally returned to Poland, where he was celebrated as a hero in the community he saved. He passed away in 2006 at the age of 93, with nothing more than medical knowledge and extraordinary bravery. A doctor managed to create a shield of protection around thousands. Thank you for watching.